Njegovo pravo ime je sloboda hrabrost. Zove se Gideon Levy. Svjetski je novinar i vrhunski intelektualac. Jedno od najznačajnijih imena današnjice u svijetu. Matična kuća mu je Haaretz, izraelski najmoćniji medij, novinar i pisac, najbolji izraelski novinar, najpoznatiji i najhrabriji. Gideon je rođen u Tel Avivu. Porodica Levy je do holokausta živjela u tadašnjoj Čehoslovačkoj. Djedovi i bake su mu ubijeni u holokaustu. Twilight Zone, Life and Death under the Israeli Occupation, knjiga, kompilacija Zona sumraka, život i smrt pod izraelskom okupacijom. To morate pročitati. Dokumentarna serija o ruskim Jevrejima. Talk show, A Personal Meeting with Gideon Levy, lični susret sa Gideonom Levyjem. Samo su neki od njegovih vrhunskih novinarskih dijela. Čovjek koji spašava čast svoje zemlje, tako ga zovu u Americi, i dodaju, snažan je liberalni glas. On je svjetsko ime. U Izraelu desnica napadaju ga kao Hamasovog propagandistu, zamislite. Ministri sugerišu vlastima da ga se na granicama tretira kao sigurnosni rizik i nazivaju radikalnim ljevičarem. Levy zaista direktno, otvoreno piše o migrantima u Izraelu, onim iz Afrike, obojenim, kako ih zovu, i onim iz Rusije, među kojima ima mnogo koji nisu Jevreji. Izraelska Labor Party ga je nazvala trojanskim konjem u Izraelu, koji je izgubio moralni kompas. Ipak, pored svega, uprkos svemu, Gideon Levy je najviše nagrađivani izraelski novinar, najpoznatiji i najpriznatiji u svijetu. Dobitnik svih, među njima najveće nagrade Sokolov. U aktualnom napadu na Gazu Levy piše, a prije nego pročitam šta, da znate da je napisao knjigu The Punishment of Gaza, kažnjavanje Gaze. Citiram, svakog dana ubijamo desetine civila koji nemaju ništa sa Hamasom. Kako Izrael može objasniti 1000 ubijene djece? Dobro večer, gospodine Levy.
Good evening and thank you for your kind introduction. Only for this it was worth being with you.
To je samo mali dio istine o vama. Samo mali dio i mali dio vaše biografije veličanstvene. Veliki ste, hrabar čovjek i čast mi je razgovarati s vama. Idemo na intervju. Gospodine Levy, gdje je bila, da tako kažem, pamet Hamasu kojim je mogao smisliti jedan takav pokolj izraelskih civila? A već 75 godina se zna da će Izrael odgovoriti odmazdom. Dakle, odmazda je strašna kao uvijek. Najviše ginu djeca, na 1000 u Gazi, na 100 u Izraelu.
Let me first tell you, with your kind permission, how moved I am to be with you tonight, because exactly 30 years ago, in the year of 93, I spent 1 week in Sarajevo, in the siege in Sarajevo, maybe one of the most powerful points in my journalistic career. And when we speak about the siege over Gaza, when we speak about the siege over Gaza, I cannot forget the scenes that I have seen in your siege with the brave people of Sarajevo who fought. And for me, it's a great honor to be here tonight. Now to your question. I don't know what they had foreseen. I know one thing. Gaza is, in the last 17 years, a cage, the biggest cage in the world. 2 million people in a cage. And when you put 2 million people in a cage, all kinds of mutations are coming out. Now, Hamas didn't do anything to protect its people, didn't prepare anything in terms of shelters, bunkers, hospitals for such, because they knew, as you just mentioned, they knew there will be a retaliation. They knew that Israel is so much stronger, and still they went for this operation. But I must remind you that that's the only way, violence, to remind the world and Israel the fact that Gaza is under siege. Because when the people of Gaza are doing nothing, the world and Israel totally ignores the fact that Gaza is a prison.
Znate koje me pitanje najviše preokupira? Malo kome imam, mogu da ga postavim. Jednostavno je. Čiji je Hamas?
Hamas is a militant, fundamentalistic organization with a military branch and a political branch. They came stronger after the big disappointment from the PLO. After Arafat died, the PLO lost its way, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and people looked for an alternative, and the only alternative around was Hamas. And ever since there is a siege over Gaza, when people are really desperate, and Hamas is being built on despair. People in Gaza today have nothing to lose. I don't think that even those who lived under the siege in Sarajevo can imagine themselves what does it mean to live in a siege over 17 years without any prospects for the future, without any outlet to the world, without a port, without an airport, without any opportunity to get out of this tiny, tiny Gaza Strip, which is really 45 kilometers long. That's the whole Gaza Strip, and is one of the most heavily populated places on earth, with over 2 million people living there. So Hamas took advantage of the despair and became the strongest group, very much not democratic. There were no elections there for the last 17 years, and very much influenced by Iran, obviously.
Neki sagovornici koji u ovoj misiji, koji znaju situaciju na Bliskom istoku, tamo su živjeli i radili, novinari, diplomate, su kazali da je moguće da je Hamas, osim što je palestinski, da je u stvari produkt obavještajnih službi, pa pominju neko Iran, neko Izrael, neko Amerikanca, neko čak u smislu finansiranja i Saudi Arabiju. Je li moguće da bude tako jedna vojna grupa u rukama i sredstvo obavještajnih službi?
I think it will be oversimplified to think it. It is a proxy of Iran, no doubt about it. It is financed and trained and equipped by Iran. Israel had its share because Israel wanted always to divide the Palestinians. The old way of imperialists to rule was to divide the local population. So Israel, as a counter force to the PLO, helped in a way to Hamas to become stronger and stronger. And in the recent years, Israel helped to deliver a lot of money to Hamas from Qatar. But having said all this, this does not mean that Hamas is not a real vivid organization with some kind of independence. They are not only puppets. They've built quite a meaningful military force in conditions of siege. And they are obviously very brutal and very barbarian, as we saw it last Saturday the 7th of October, when they really behaved like ISIS. No other way to describe it. I've been to the south after they've been there. One day later, I never saw such barbaric scenes.
Upravo dolaze informacije, najave da bi u nekoliko narednih sati ili dana Izrael mogao sa vojnicima, dakle kopnenom vojskom, da uđe u Gazu. Pominju se cifra od nekoliko desetina, čak do nevjerovatnih 300.000 vojnika koji bi ušli u Gazu. Hoće li Izrael ući sa vojskom u Gazu i šta će se desiti ako se odluči na kopnenu ofanzivu? Direktno ću da vam postavim pitanje. Ako uđu, šta je cilj? Zna li Izrael šta će postići? Očistiti prostor, istjerati samo Hamas, ponovo okupirati Gazu ili šta?
It seems that it's question of hours and maximum days. I don't see a situation in which after recruiting 350,000 soldiers, Israel will all of a sudden say, no, we had the second thought and we are not going to invade Gaza. I think the invasion is a fait accompli. The only question is when. And the big question is what will happen then. Because I guess that Hamas is well prepared for the entrance of Israel. Israel tried to evacuate all the north part of the Gaza Strip, but not everyone left. So it will face still a civilian population of 300,000 people who didn't leave, and Israel cannot treat them in bigger brutality than the international law allows, because the Americans are very strict about it. And then we will see what happened. The main target will be what we call downtown Gaza, namely Gaza under the surface, all the channels that they had digged under the surface, which is a whole city under the surface, and there where they are, and Israel will try to get there. I guess there will be many casualties by both sides, but the real big question is how will Hezbollah in the north react? Because if Hezbollah in the north will join the war, Israel will face a challenge that it never faced before, and we are really coping with a new reality that Israel never met before, quite dangerous, quite frightening, and I'm very, very concerned.
Iran, citiram vas, doslovce pišete i kažete, ne dao Bog da se Iran uključi.
Yes, if Iran joins in, we might, I say we might, face a world war, not less than this. The Americans might get involved in this scenario. The Americans are already all around with their carriers. 2 carriers are in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, and they might get involved, and they promise to get involved if Iran gets in. If the Americans get involved, God forbid, Russia and China might get involved. And you know, we are sitting now quite peaceful and quite enjoying our time. And within days, we can face a revolutionary reality, including, in a very extreme case, including a world war, not less than this.
To, kako biste rekao, u nekom šoku, blagom sam, govore svi, očekuju svi. Logičan je zaključak da će izbiti svjetski rat ako se uključi Iran, Rusija, Amerika, arapske zemlje okolo. Ali kada to kaže Gideon Levy, onda se i novinar sa ovakvim iskustvom prepadne.
Absolutely. Look, I don't think this scenario is probable. For sure, not the most probable scenario. I truly believe that somehow also Hezbollah and Iran are not suicidal because they will not get into it knowing the power of Israel, and Israel is stronger. The only problem is if Israel can survive two fronts, even though Israel has the strongest army with the best technology among all those actors. But it will not be an easy job. And I don't know how strong is the Israeli society. And it is frightening. But let's remember that those scenarios that we portrayed here are the extremist scenarios. And still I believe it will be local, namely a ground operation in Gaza with some kind of provocation from Hezbollah. And then after a few weeks or few months, we'll get back to square one. By the way, the ground operation will not solve anything on my view, but I think it's too late to discuss it because I think the decisions were got already, were already made, and Israel will go to Gaza.
Ako sada taj izraelsko-palestinski rat ostane, kako bih rekao, u blažoj formi svjetske, dakle regionalni, to je kao jedna od varijanti sa uključivanjem Hezbollaha sa sjevera, grupa i tako dalje. Čak neki govore da bi to bilo na četiri fronta. Koliko je on spreman, Izrael, da na 2 ili 4 fronta se uopšte brani, da uopšte ratuje ili da napada ako se to desi?
You see, on Saturday the 7th, we saw that Israel is totally not prepared because the fiasco of Saturday was such a fiasco militarily. No intelligence, no preparations. And then after it started, there was no army around. I mean, the Palestinians from Gaza, the Hamas people, the Hamas fighters went into Israel like in a promenade on bicycles, and nobody stopped them for many hours. This was a very warning sign that the Israeli army, with all its technology and with all its budgets, maybe is in a bad position. I don't know. Time will show. I know that for a long time there was some sense of arrogance in Israel that we are the strongest and nothing can happen to us and we don't have to be too worried. This is always very dangerous when you get to this hubris and you don't prepare yourself. I hope this is wrong. The spirit is now different. The spirit is now of really people who want to go and fight. Let's see and hope that there will be no catastrophe and that we will be, both of us, be able to talk again in 1, 2 or 3 months when everything will be over. I hope it will not take longer.
Građani Izraela, prvenstveno mislim na 75% Jevreja, kako oni doživljavaju i preživljavaju ovu situaciju? Dakle, gledano odavde iz Evrope, čini se da su jedinstveni, nazovimo to, u odbrani. I pod onom krilaticom Izrael ima pravo da se brani po svaku cijenu. Je li baš tako društvo suštinski trenirano da bude militarističko? Je li ipak spremno ili je ipak svjesno kakva opasnost prijeti u čitavom regionu Izraelu?
So let me just correct you. I mean, the Jews in sovereign Israel are 80%, and 20% are the Palestinian citizens of Israel. The 80%, the Jews, were very divided until 2 weeks ago. We went through one of the most stormy periods in the history of Israel when there were very clear 2 camps, and the left center was demonstrating for months and months against Netanyahu. And it became really a very vivid society and very divided with a lot of hatred. People even started to talk about a civil war, which didn't happen and I don't think will happen. But once the danger from outside came, you feel a sense of getting united, and the threat from outside unites peoples and unites also the Israelis. So right now there is a sense of being together against the danger, the threats from the outside.
Netanjahu, čitam jedan izvještaj, odnosno anketu, novo istraživanje, izraelsko, relevantno, ali da se čovjek zamisli, rezultat 80% građana Izraela kaže Netanjahu mora da ode. Sa pitanje jeste, ali kada ili prekasno. Inače, vaša novina, vaš medij, Haaretz, piše da je za rat odgovoran Netanjahu. Koja je njegova uloga? Da li je ovo htio, da li je tražio, da li mu je to dobro došlo? Što se desilo pored Gaze?
I had some good opinions about Netanyahu until this crisis. I was even labeled as a Bibist, someone who supports him, which was a little exaggerated, obviously. But I can tell you that right now he's finished. He was Prime Minister of Israel in the last 15 years, and being Prime Minister for so many years means also accountability, means also responsibility, and means also blame. And he will have to pay the price of the fiasco until now. I can tell you that anger and frustrations against him is now crossing camps. It's not only the left. Even in his own party, people just wait for the end of the war to kick him out, to get rid of him. This man will not be able to lead Israel after this war, whatever will be the outcome.
Često se i odavno čuje u evropskim, arapskim komentarima, pa i u komentarima iz Amerike, rečenica užasna da izraelska vlada ili Netanjahu je nacistička i neonacistička. Kako komentarišete ovakve komentare, jednu užasnu kvalifikaciju koji god da je Jevrej ali Jevreja da vladaju kao njihovi dušmani?
It's not only horrible, it's also not true. It's not only not true, it is also not effective. Because it's very easy to prove that this is not a Nazi government. And if it's not a Nazi, then we can all say, oh, so it's a wonderful government. No, it is not a Nazi government and not a wonderful government. It's a very, very extreme right-wing government with some elements there which might be described as neo-Nazis. Neo-Nazis, not Nazis by all means, but they are just a minority in this government. They for sure should not be part of the Israeli government. They are more extreme than most of the right-wing extreme parties in Europe today, calling to kill the Arabs, calling to transfer the Arabs, all kind of expressions like this, but they are not the government. They are just one component in the government. And by and large, I think that comparison to the Nazis is always counterproductive and shouldn't happen because the Nazis were the Nazis and nothing can be compared to them.
Kakva je to moć Izraela? U čemu je moć Izraela da, tako kažem, da na noge Netanjahu dolaze u par dana trojice, jedan predsjednik i dva premijera, američki predsjednik, britanski premijer i njemački premijer. To je baš na noge u jednoj vrlo opasnoj situaciji, čak je Scholz tamo morao da leži na aerodromu. Ali pitanje je konkretnije ovdje u tim pregovorima, u nagovaranjima je to. Da li Izrael sluša Ameriku ili Amerika sluša Izrael?
That's a very good question because I'm not sure that we can give a full answer to the secret. How come that Israel is such a darling of the West? How come that Israel can do almost whatever it wants and never pay a price to violate resolutions of the international community, to violate the international law, to maintain an occupation which no country in the world recognizes for 55 years now? I mean, you see, when Russia invaded the Crimea or Ukraine later on, within weeks there were sanctions against Russia. And Israel is maintaining an occupation of 55 years and nobody even did start to think about sanctions over Israel. And on the other hand, when Israel is in trouble like now, this parade of sympathy and solidarity of all over the world is really amazing. I think it has to do with the past. I think that still, at least in certain countries in Europe, there is still a deep sense of guilt toward what happened to the Jewish people. And I think it's genuine, and I think it's good that it's there because the world should be feeling guilty, or at least parts of the world, for what happened only less than 100 years ago. But there are also many interests involved. By the end of the day, Israel is the outpost of the West in the Middle East. I'm not sure it's the only democracy in the Middle East, because when you have an occupation, you are not really a democracy, but still it maintains some Western values. Now, right now, Israel is in a very fragile situation, and therefore, unlikely in the past, Israel has to listen to the United States. And the visit of President Biden was a very interesting visit because he hugged Israel like no American president had ever hugged Israel. But everyone knows to this hug, there is also a price. And the price will be that Israel will have to listen to the American president, because Israel depends on America right now like never before. And we saw already signs. The humanitarian convoy that came into Gaza today was against Israel's policy, but Israel had to obey to the United States because this is the price for the solidarity.
Mogu samo da zamislim koliko ste obavješteni, koliko imate informacija iza. Da li možda znate ili pretpostavljate šta je Biden mogao reći Netanjahu iza vrata, iza kamera, u zatvorenom prostoru, face to face?
First of all, I don't know, like you don't know and nobody knows, but I think that things are quite clear. There are no free lunches. And if you get a lunch, you have to pay for it. And the American support right now is amazing. They supply Israel now with all kinds of equipment, military equipment. They already the other day there were over 20 missiles and other devices shot from Yemen toward Israel, and the American army shot it down. Those things, when the biggest superpower in the world is doing, like it never done for anyone, maybe even not for Ukraine, those things carry a price. And I don't think that much must be said in the closed room, because the understanding by both is very clear. Israel is now in the hands of the United States for the good and for the bad.
Danas je u Egiptu arapsko-evropski summit, tamo su predsjednici i premijeri i pričaju i opet ponavljaju da je jedino rješenje za Izrael i Palestinu dvije odvojene nezavisne države. Pravo da vam kažem, meni ta ideja o dvije države, Palestini i Izraelu, izgleda nerealno, nadrealno. Da je bila moguće ili da je Izrael to htio, to bi se nekada davno još prije ostvarilo ili bez ovoga. Ali je paradoksalno da govore o rješenju, a na pragu smo velikog regionalnog ili gotovo svjetskog rata. Ali šta je rješenje?
First of all, we have to go through this war, obviously. Those conferences with the Europeans and some moderate, so-called moderate Arab states are usually only words and words and words, and they are not followed by actions, and they should not be taken too seriously. I think the Europeans who speak now about the two-state solution know better than anyone else that the two-state solution died long time ago. And exactly as you say that, I was happy to hear your opinion that if Israel would have liked to go for the two-state solution, it could and should have done it 20 years ago. It's too late now. We have over 700,000 settlers in the West Bank. Nobody is going to evacuate them. And if you don't evacuate them, there is no room for a Palestinian viable state, just no room. Come and see the West Bank and you'll understand that no independent state can be there between all the settlements and the villages and this impossible reality. For the long run, for the very long run, the only solution, on my view, but very few people share it with me, the only solution is one democratic state between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, one person, one vote, equality, two nations living in one state in equal terms. I know that the lesson from your own country is not very encouraging, to say the least. This was not a very successful experience in Yugoslavia, and it will maybe not be a very good experience here, but there is no other solution. For the long run, it's either an apartheid state or a democracy. And the international community will have to decide what does it prefer.
Još jednom, mislite da je jedino rješenje jedna država? Koja država? Kako bi se zvala?
The name is the last problem, as you may think. It can be ISRAPALESTIN or PALAISRAEL. The name is not the problem. Obviously, creating a radical new reality in which Arabs and Jews live in equality together, because they are living together also today. The only problem, by the way, unlikely in your country, the life together in certain places is working, not everywhere, but there are some examples where it is working. The problem is that they are not living in equal conditions together. And this reality should be changed. And I believe, again, it's not the time now. The time now is, first of all, to put an end to the siege over Gaza, to open Gaza to the world, and to create some new reality in Gaza. But for the vision for the long run, at least my vision, is a secular state in which Arabs and Jews, Muslims and Jews will live together like any normal country. It shouldn't be a Jewish country like Bosnia is not a Muslim country. Bosnia is now a democratic country, and Israel should be a democratic country not necessarily Jewish and not necessarily Palestinian, but democratic and secular. But we are very far from there.
Ideja je nevjerovatna zato što, a usporedba sa Bosnom i Hercegovinom je sasvim ok, normalna je. Ali i tamo u vašoj zemlji i kod nas ovdje u našoj zemlji ljudi hoće, žele, vole da se prebrojavaju. Kada se ta matematika uzme u obzir, a upravo ste kazali da bi u toj nekoj zajedničkoj arapsko, izraelskoj ili jevrejskoj arapskoj zemlji bilo jedan čovjek, jedan glas. Kada se sve sabere, koliko Jevreja ima, koliko Palestinaca na zapadnoj obali, u samom Izraelu preko 1,5 milijuna, u Gazi preko 2 miliona, negdje u brojkama je to tu negdje, gotovo podjednak broj Jevreja i Arapa. Stvarno možete zamisliti jednu državu na kojoj ima više partija, sve to i onda jedan čovjek, jedan glas i ko pobjedi i da država ne bude ni jevrejska ni arapska.
I know it sounds right now very surreal, but what is the alternative? There is no alternative. We have to realize that the two-state solution is dead. And I really condemn all those who continue to speak about the two-state solution because they know the bluff. They know that it will never be achieved anymore, and they continue to talk about it as a lip service. But by the end of the day, we have to think also about a solution, about a vision. And the real solution is only this. I know it is very, very complicated. But on the other hand, what is the alternative? The alternative is to continue to live from war to war, every 2-3 years, every 4-5 years, a war. Each war is worse than the former war. Each war is more brutal and more barbaric than the former war. Where does it lead us? How will young people live in this reality? And until when? Both Palestinians and Jews. There must be a moment in which we have to ask ourselves, are we ready to live this life? I mean, people don't want it. People cannot take it anymore. People in Gaza and also people in Tel Aviv.
I za kraj, vaše lično iskustvo sa Bosnom i Hercegovinom i pratite nas. Bili ste ovdje 2 puta, bili ste u ratu 1993. godine, bili ste 20 godina nakon toga na godišnjici oslobođenja ovdje. I mi ovdje sebi mi tepamo da je Sarajevo evropski Jerusalem. Imali smo značajnu jevrejsku zajednicu, nažalost nastradali su, pobijeni, kao i vaša porodica u holokaustu. Imali smo i rat u mnogim elementima sličan izraelsko-palestinskom. I sada pitam vas, vi to znate, naš mir je ovdje tanak. Mislite da bi ovdje opet mogao da izbije rat, naručen, isprovociran od nekoga iz svijeta, nekoga velikoga? Obično mi ovdje, kada govorimo ovih godina, mislimo da bi to Rusija mogla da ovdje zapali. Šta mislite, da li otvaranje više frontova u svijetu odgovara nekome, dakle Bliski istok, Balkan, Zapadni Balkan, i da to velikim silama odgovara? Rusiji možda.
Look, I remember the scenes, as I told you in the beginning of our conversations, the scenes in Sarajevo under the siege, really touching, and I'm even shivering now when I remember what I've seen there in '93, in this week that I spent in the Holiday Inn. I even can remember my room number there. It was really horrifying. And 10 years later, I came back and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that at least some kind of normal life was returned. When I was there in '93, who believed that Sarajevo will have traffic in the streets, will have food in the streets, will have, and here it recovered. I know there are so many problems yet, but still it's so much better than it was in '93, obviously. Many things are unthinkable. If I would have met you in the late 80s and I would have told you that within a few months, Soviet Russia is going to fall, South Africa apartheid is going to fall, the Berlin Wall is going to fall, you would have thought that I'm out of my mind. Nobody had foreseen it. Nobody, no historians or experts or politicians or generals. Nobody saw it. So we have to believe also in the unexpected. Now, coming back to your part, of the world, as you know much better than I do, it is still very, very fragile, and things can get out of control. But in the same time, we have also to believe that something is being created in those years of normality or half normality. The Russians, who can predict how this crazy man will behave, Putin, and for how long is he going to stay with us? Look what he had done to his own country, to his own people. Look what he is doing in Ukraine now. It's quite frightening. But let's hope for the good, both in your part of the world and in our part of the world. Here we say from time to time that one should be realistic enough to believe in miracles. So let's believe in miracles, both in Sarajevo, in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in Israel, Palestine.
Za kraj pitanje čijeg se odgovora svi plaše. Ima li Izrael nuklearno naoružanje i da li je spreman da ga iskoristi ako osjeti da u nekom regionalnom svjetskom ratu je ugrožen, to jest da gubi?
I don't think anyone has doubts about this question. It's taken as a fact by the international media, by international politics. But would it do some use in it? Only in very extreme situation, which I hope will never occur. If we will get there, this might be really the end of the whole project. I really hope we will not need to get there. I really hope that no country in the world will ever get there. But you think that people don't think about it now? When worse come really to worse, when half of Israel will be conquered by Hezbollah and Hamas and Iranian soldiers, hopefully this is not going to happen. But if this will happen, everyone understands that if you have certain weapons, you have them to deteriorate, and then, if there is no other choice, also to make use in them. So let's hope we'll not get there.
Gospodine Levy, hvala vam za ovaj intervju. Hvala vam što ste takav čovjek. Čestitam na vašoj hrabrosti. Veliki ste.
Thank you so much. I was really moved by this interview. And I hope to see you once, all of you, face to face in Sarajevo, or in Jerusalem, or in Tel Aviv.
Ako Bog da. Hvala vam. Hvala vam i sretno. I živjeli.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Gideon Levy.